Welcome to today's session. My name is Nellie Deutsch, and I'm going to be talking about language learning. If you could add in the chat box where you're from and anything else, feel free to use the chat box. I see Philip has started. He's from Germany. Feel free to use the chat box for questions, for comments, and to chat in general. I use the chat because it helps me stay focused. I kind of talk to everybody. It's a social kind of environment that keeps me on my toes when I listen to somebody else speak. I find it a lot easier to use the chat than to listen to a video, watch a video, or listen to audio where I can't, constantly add my comments. So, hello, Guadalupe from Mexico. Great. All right, so, and we've got Venezuela, Thomas, excellent. All right, so today's session is about theories. We're going to focus on theories. Later on, in the next weeks to come, we'll be discussing approaches to language learning and specifically approaches to teaching English as a foreign and in some cases second language. We'll talk about methods, and at the end we'll discuss class management. It doesn't matter whether it's online or face-to-face. There is a need for class management. So today we're going to focus on theories of learning, and we'll start with learning. What is learning? Okay, I think that's the huge question, and our thoughts and opinions on learning generally determine how we teach. So what we think about learning is really important. You may find that your ideas about learning change when you start teaching online. And when you start teaching in general, you'll find that as the years go by, you may find that your ideas change. All right, so Philip's got acquiring knowledge. Hello, Brenda from Paraguay. Good to see you. Okay, don't be shy. Feel free to use the chat. I'm looking and I'm not seeing everybody responding to where they're from. All right. It is acquiring knowledge. It's everything that you say that it is, okay? Because that's what you think learning is. But there's a great book that I don't think it's too expensive. It's called Applying the Science of Learning. And it's by Richard E. Meyer, who is a proponent of using technology. The book is very thin. I don't know if you can see. It's very thin. So there's not, it's a very, very user-friendly book, especially for most of us who don't have much time for, it has a lot of really clear ideas, lots of tables and graphs, and really a wonderful modern way of approaching learning as a science. Okay, so it's called Applying the Science of Learning by Richard E. Meyer. I've mentioned his name before. That's true, Guadalupe. Everyone learns in different ways. The question is, how does the brain, we all have the same brains. So, scientifically, what happens in our brain? Of course, there are different variables that influence it, but what happens in the brain? And if you think about learning, the idea is change. We change when we learn. Okay, that's the idea of there was no need for change. And when you think about the science of learning and the idea of the Newton way of learning, which says that there are laws and you have to follow those laws, then what is science? And then there's the quantum theory of changes and unpredictable. Can we predict the change that will happen when we learn? Okay, so it's not that simple. So language learning by Richard E. Meyer is called Applying the Science of Learning, and you can apply this to any kind of learning. And he focuses on how people learn. And think about it. That's right, according to neurology, right. And psychologists, don't forget, they all have a say in that too. How do people learn? Okay, that's the first question that he focuses on. The second question is, how can we help people learn? What can we do as teachers? Because our goal is to help people learn. What can we do to make this happen? And the third aspect is, how do we determine what people know? In other words, assessing. So the first question is, we need to know a little bit about how people learn. And then, how can we help them? And finally, how do we know what they learned? Right, we need to analyze. Very good, Philip. That's right. We need to assess. So today we're going to discuss learning theories. And the question is, it's great to have theories, but how do they apply to our educational practice? So one connects with the other. Our learning theories have to connect with how we teach. Otherwise, what's the point? Yeah, there are lots of articles. Thank you, Thomas, by Richard Meyer. In fact, if you go to YouTube, you'll find Richard Meyer there too. I I find Richard Meyer very, very practical. You know, he talks about theories, but he has a very practical way, and he believes, well, you'll read about it, but he's got all the theories there, and then his ideas. Okay, so from theories, we're going to go into practice. So we're not going to stay with the theories, but we do have to know a little bit about the theories to know what we're doing. And there are three aspects. There's instruction, there's the learning, and assessment. Now, what comes first? Well, as teachers, we hope that by instructing students, by our instruction, or whatever that is going to be in the classroom, there will be learning. And we will have to find out what learning took place by assessing it. And this is all based on Myers. So there are 6 learning theories for languages. Theories. There are other approaches and there are different methods, but there are 6 theories. And some of them you will recognize. The first one is a behaviorist theory. How many of you have heard of behaviorism? Well, if you look at the word behave, that's a critical aspect of the theory. All right, very good, Huda. Good to see you. Haven't seen you in a while. Okay, so it's how we behave. Okay, so it's based on behavior. The next one is universal grammar. Most of you are probably familiar with Noam, well, professor, right? Noam Chomsky or Chomsky? Chomsky. Okay. Have you heard of him? Well, he developed something called universal grammar, which means that we all have the ability to learn a language. And the grammar that we have is innate. We are born with a certain kind of grammar in our brains. And then depending on the language, doesn't matter what language we are born into, there is a universal grammar that allows us to learn languages. Okay, and that's what Chomsky developed. And it was very revolutionary because the idea was very transformational. It meant that if you go deep into the brain, you will find that we're all born with this. Of course, you can't really prove this. Okay, we're talking about theories. Okay, remember, these are only theories. Next is Krashen's monitor, and you must have heard of Krashen. Most of us probably learned English through this theory, and the idea is that you practice a language that is acquired. So the key here is acquiring a language. You don't learn a language, you acquire it in a natural way. The same way that you acquire your first language. We don't go to school from the age of 1 when we were born to learn a language. We have the ability, as Chomsky said, and Krashen went a bit further to say that we all learn a second language or a third language the way we learn a first language. Behavior, by the word behavior, you mean change. And then there's the cognitive theory. The cognitive theory of language learning is very similar to the behaviorist. They're very similar. The only difference is that with a cognitive, you measure knowledge, not behavior. In other words, in the behaviorist, it's how you behave as a language learner. And with a cognitive, it's the knowledge that you have. Okay, so that's the cognitive. And then there's the conversation theory. Conversation means that you learn through conversation, hello Halima, through discussions and conversations, and that's how you pick up or acquire language. Very similar to the idea that it's natural to learn a second language, and you do it through listening to conversations, but not only listening, but actually conducting conversations yourself. How many of you learned English through conversations? If you could just put your thumbs up. Or learned another foreign language. If English is your native language, if you learned a foreign language through conversations. That's a good point, Philip. Okay, we're not saying whether these are wrong or right. These are theories, and theories are theories, okay? You can accept them, use them, or not accept them. They're just theories. Spanish, Brenda, you use through conversation. Helena, you never learned a language through conversation? You must be thinking of Latin. Okay, how do you teach language today? Do you teach it through conversation? Later. Okay. So I think, Helena, you teach English through conversation. Exactly. Okay, so this is a theory it's a social theory. It's interacting. Okay, the idea behind the conversation is interacting with the other students, and the students interact with the teacher through conversations and dialogue. Right. And then there's the Schumann's acculturation. Have any of you heard of John Schumann's acculturation theory of language learning? Give me a thumbs up if you have. No, not at all. Yeah. John Schumann did a study, and he came up with a theory that people who come to countries, we're talking about immigrants to different countries, have no choice. So they learn the language because they want to be part of the culture. So you learn a language in order to be part of the culture. Hello, Halima. There are many theories, but we're talking about theories. I don't know if you came at the beginning. We're talking about theories, not methods and not approaches, even though conversation does seem like an approach. All right, so these are the 6 theories that we're going to look at. Are there any questions before we get started talking about the theories? At the end, you will have a chance to decide which of these theories suits you as a teacher. Yeah, you don't teach culture. The idea is that you learn a language because you want to be part of the culture. It's not really, acculturation means becoming part of the society that you're in. So if an immigrant goes from, say, Poland to the United States, they have a need to learn English because they want to be part of the American way of life. Okay, so that's what it's based on. If you're interested, you can find all of these theories by Googling them. If you Google Schumann's Acculturation, even on Wikipedia, sorry, you'll find it there. So you'll have a chance to do this. Of course, don't forget to join the course, okay, because you'll have a chance to share this in the course. And I'll tell you what, you also have, don't forget, I'm an active learning believer, so you'll have some tasks to do during the week until next week. All right, so we're going to start with the behavior. Don't forget that learning is about change, okay? If we look at the slide, I think it was the previous slide here, slide number 3, learning is about change, okay? And it's about, okay, using learning practices for educational purposes. Okay, so behaviorism. We want to change our students' behavior. I know that sounds terrible, but that's what we do. Okay, the idea, every teacher is in the classroom, whether it's a physical classroom or a virtual classroom. Every teacher wants the students to change, because learning means changing, and you want to change their behavior. So let's say your students say, "I go home now." Okay, that's a wonderful change. They couldn't say anything before, and now they can say, "I go home now." Okay, but you want them to go through a change. So how are you going to get them to go from saying, "I go home now," to saying, "I am going home now"? How are you going to get them from one place to the other? Well, you're going to change their behavior. How will you change their behavior? In the behaviorist way. Okay, so how will you do it? Okay, any ideas? You want to change their behavior. Well, you're going to tolerate. What are you going to do? You have to change their situation, right? You want to change the way they're saying it. They're making a mistake. They're making a grammar mistake. How are you going to get them to change? Well, you might make them repeat it. And every time they say, you're going to say, "I'm going home now." "Oh, I'm going home now." And then they will say, "Oh, yes, I'm going home now." And then they'll repeat it. Next day, they'll come to school and say, "Bye, teacher, I go home now." Boom. So what are you going to do? You're going to have to reinforce and give them rewards. Okay, and that's how it's done, through rewards and correction. Thank you, Fabiana. But rewarding, don't forget, you're going to correct them and reward. Correct them and reward. You're going to do this over and over and over again until they get it, until it becomes automatic. Are you going to explain things? Nah, you're not going to explain. You're just going to make them automatic. No explanations for behaviorists. Okay, now how many of you use a behaviorist approach, or how many of you have learned a language through a behaviorist approach? With lots of repetitions, maybe repeating together. Okay, everybody together. "I am going home now." Very good. Okay, think about it. How many of you? Okay, give me a thumbs up if you have either taught or have gone through a behaviorist way of learning a language. Okay, that's how we learn. Okay, and then you think of Pavlov and you say, oh no, oh no, oh no. Because Pavlov and the whole theory of behaviorism sounds terrible, right? But we use it. We use it to this day. Okay, so let's not be afraid. We're using it. Okay, all right. So the behaviorists, we want the environment to show us that the behavior of the learner has changed. So we do everything in the environment so that we see learner behavior change. We look for behavior and we focus on behavior. Yeah, we're not talking about methods, Fabiana. We're talking about theories. We'll talk about behavior. We'll talk about methods. I mentioned this in the first slide, that we're going to be talking about theories, approaches, methods, and class management. Today we're talking about theories, not about approaches, okay? Just theories. Okay, so I'm going back to, okay, the behaviorist theory. So we're trying to change behavior. Universal grammar. Again, who came up with this brilliant idea? Transformational. Who came up? Do you remember? I mentioned at the beginning. Let's see if you remember the guy's name. That's right. Very good, Thomas. Chomsky. That's right. Chomsky. And sometimes it's called Chomskonian. It's called deep grammar, underlying grammar. There are lots of names for it. I don't know how many of you studied it deeply. I did. And I liked it. It was really, really fun to learn it. It's a theory, okay? And the theory says that we are all born. We have what's called innate grammar. Innate grammar means that we're all born with certain grammar parts in our brain. That's what we're born with, okay? So Chomsky's inborn or innate universal grammar theory. That means that everybody, if you're born in China, or you're born in the States, or in Russia, or in Poland, or in Paraguay, or in Germany, who else do we have here? Or in Venezuela, or in Mexico, or in, let's see, other countries that we have here. Give me countries. Argentina, Iceland. I didn't know you were in Iceland. Fabiana, I had no idea you were born in Iceland. Do you live there? Wow. Egypt, excellent. Oh, you're in Argentina, but you were born in Iceland. Wow. Any other countries? India, excellent. All right, so we've got, did I miss a country? So no matter where you were born, okay, no matter where you were born with this innate universal grammar so that you are able, oh, that's right, Uzbekistan, that's right, we've got Uzbekistan as well. You were born with the ability to learn a language because you have the grammar. In other words, you're born with these grammar rules in your brain. How many of you like this theory? Chomsky became very famous with this idea. You like it. Okay, I loved it in the 1970s, I don't know, when it was very popular. And I thought it was brilliant. It was called transformational grammar. We had to do exercises, transformational grammar. We had to do all kinds of exercises, and it was a lot of fun, as I said. With trees, he had trees, these trees, and these graphs and everything. Okay, that's the Chomskyan idea. And then there's Krashen's. Everybody is crazy about Krashen. Krashen is very, very popular. He developed this in the 80s. Right now, Krashen, you can find him, lots of YouTube videos with Krashen. And it's called Krashen's Monitor. And the idea here is about natural language. And that is that you learn your second, third, fourth, foreign, and so on language the same way that you learn the first. Now it's interesting because before Krashen came up with this idea, I was using it in school because it seemed natural to me too. As a young English teacher, I was still a student, I felt that this was the best way to learn, and I believed in it. I really did. And that's what I practiced, okay? So I based my approach to English language learning through, well, before Krashen was around because his theory came later. I started teaching before, but I based it on the fact that first and second language are learned in the same way. Now, there are a lot of disagreements about this theory. How is it possible to learn a second language when you're over the age of 12, the same way that you learn the first one? Yeah, so it wasn't accepted. Not everybody accepted it. I know when I was using it, not everybody accepted it. But when Krashen came up with his theory, everybody started saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay? So we acquire a foreign language the same as we acquire the first. So think how you acquire the first in your house, where you hear the language, lots of exposure to the language, your mother language, your first tongue, whatever you want to call it. You hear your parents, you hear your brothers, your sisters, your surroundings. You go to school, you hear the language, and that's how you pick it up. You pick it up naturally because of Chomsky's universal grammar, okay? And that's how you pick up your foreign language. How many of you agree with that? How many of you have learned a language when you were older, a foreign language? Do you find, was it natural for you to learn it? Okay, exactly, Thomas. Most adult learners say, no, it's not natural at all. It's very, very artificial. It's very difficult. I have to know the grammar. If I don't know the grammar, I can't do it. In other words, there's a lot of opposition from adults and even from kids about this natural way of learning a foreign language. Okay, so it's a theory. And of course, the cognitive theory. Cognition means knowledge. Okay, so it's based on change in knowledge. If you are 0 today, and if you learn something, you become 1. Now you know 1. You are nothing, and then you learn something. So the change is your knowledge. The question is, what do you do with your knowledge? Okay, next time we're going to talk about constructivism and connectivism and other approaches to language learning. But cognition means that you know something. And grammar is cognition. If you know grammar rules, okay, in a foreign language, that means that you know. The question is, what do you do with it? Okay, so maybe a combination of cognitive and behaviorism. You know something and then you behave and you use it correctly, that might be good. But cognition is only change in knowledge. You have change in knowledge and that's your behavior. It doesn't mean that you're going to behave that way. So just knowing is a change. So from nothing, and now you know something. So parts of speech, you didn't know parts of speech. You teach your students the parts of speech. They know the parts of speech. That's cognition. Can they use it in real language? No, or maybe yes. Okay, so that's cognition. Exactly. Knowing, just because you know about English doesn't mean that you can speak it or you write it or understand what you're reading. Or, so producing doesn't mean anything. So behavior is producing, cognition is just knowing. Conversation. All right, this is a relatively new theory. And it means exactly what it says. It means that you learn a language through conversation. So I'm sure you've, maybe with a combination of behaviorism, but it's through talking. So you talk, 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 and you get better. First, you need the vocabulary, of course, to be able to talk. But you learn the vocabulary and the grammar through conversation. That's a good point, Thomas. Just because you speak English, that's right, you have no cognition. You might not know anything about the language until you start teaching it, which happened to most of us. Most native speakers of English knew nothing about the English language until they started teaching it. Exactly, Helena. That's the idea. The idea is to learn through conversation. Remember, this is not teaching. We're talking about language learning. How is language learned? These are theories of language learning. They are not theories of language teaching. Those are approaches. We'll talk about approaches and methods of teaching. Right now, we're just talking about language learning. And that's why theories, because teaching is practical. Theories are just theories. The question is, what do you do with the theories? Yeah, it disappeared for a minute because I wanted to fix my glasses. All right, my students do not learn grammar. Okay, that's an approach, Helena. We're talking about theories of language learning. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. So language through conversation. Language learning through conversation means that you base everything on meaning. So if you say, hello, everyone, it's not only the words that you use, it's your body language. Hi, or bye-bye. Okay, so you're using meaning. Collocations, that's right. You're using meaning. And that's how knowledge is constructed. So the brain, we're talking about language learning theory, the brain processes the information from the meaning that it gets. So body language, it's really important to have body language. So you need to see the teacher. You need to see the person in front of you. And you need to see a lot of language speakers. Okay, you need to see them. A lot of nonverbal, that's right. A lot of emotions. Okay, Helena, I think you're going to love this. So language learning through conversation has a lot of feelings and emotions in it because that's where you get meaning. You construct meaning from what you get, the interactions through the conversation. So if your teacher smiles, you know she's saying something nice. Like she says, hello. So you might not get the hello. It may be good morning or good afternoon or good night, but at least you know that it's something pleasant. The teacher is conversing with you in a pleasant way. All right, so that's learning language learning theory through conversation. And then there is the final one, which is acculturation. What is acculturation? Okay, this is John Schumann's. Okay, John Schumann's idea was that you learn not a foreign language necessarily, but a second language. When you go to a country, that's where you learn the language. And the reason you learn the language is that you want to be part of the culture. And you know what? This might be a foreign language reason. Why are people motivated to learn English in most parts of the world? Why? Why does everybody want to learn English? English is a huge business. Why? Because people want to be part of the culture. It could be, that's right, maybe it's the American culture, maybe it's the British culture, maybe, well, I'm not going to say Canadian because there's no such thing as a Canadian culture. American culture, British, maybe Australian, if there is such a thing. But it's mostly American and British, I would say. And maybe globalization. But you know, it's not so, it's being part. You want to be part of some organization. In this case, it's a country. It's a culture. So if you want to be part of a culture, you have to behave. You have to change your behavior. Otherwise, you cannot be identified as part of that culture. So it's identifying with a culture. So when you speak English, do you identify with a certain culture? I know that's a tough question. If you do, see, as a Canadian, I have a problem because Canadians have no identity. They have nothing. It's an immigrant country. So it's not, you're never a Canadian. It's what your parents, where do you come from? It's your, you know, your family culture. So we're talking about when you speak English. So Helena says USA. So you feel like you're part of this culture. Okay, so that's the idea. Your students probably pick it up too. Okay, so that's the idea. The idea is to orient yourself with the culture, and that's how you learn the language. Okay, and you do this through social interactions. So acculturation is actually socialization. Do any of you know anything about sociology? Because this is a sociology idea. That's right, global English, you can take it there. But you're talking about approaches and methods of language teaching. You're not talking about theories, okay? We're talking about sociology. Okay, sociology has acculturation. So if you've ever studied sociology, acculturation, or if you're interested in the idea of acculturation, acculturation means that you take part in social interactions. Participation, that's right. And don't forget, we're talking about theories of learning. I'm going to repeat this. Okay, theories of learning. All right, and now for your part. I finished my part. Okay, I talked enough. Now this is your part. Okay, and this is the course. How many of you have joined the course? If not, there it is again. It's called Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. This course is for anybody who wants to teach English. You don't have to be an English teacher. You can be anyone with a passion for teaching English. And notice acculturation is not about culture. It's about becoming part of a group. Okay? So language learning theories. What does, you're going to blog or wiki, up to you, blog or wiki. about this. Okay, it's up to you whether you want to blog or wiki. By the way, what do you prefer, blog or wiki? I think I prefer to wiki, but I blog most of the time. I like wikis better. And I prefer Wiki Educator to any other wiki. I'm so glad, Fabiana. Okay, but the only way to learn is, or to sustain learning, is to do something with it. Because if you don't do anything with it, you lose it. If you don't use it, you lose it. Okay, so it's really important to continue and do something with it. So the questions are, and you will get the link to the PowerPoint presentations. It's in the courseware, in the course. What does each language theory emphasize? Next question, how will each language learning theory contribute to your teaching? Next question is, what language theory did your teachers use to teach a foreign language? By the way, those of you who do the tasks will get a certificate at the end of the course signed by myself, and I think that's worth something. What language theory did your teachers use to teach a foreign language? Hello, Neves. Good to see you. Sorry you're late, but you can get the PowerPoint presentation in the course, Neves, so I hope you join the course. There it is. Everything is there, including the recording. And next question is, what language theory do you prefer and why? And the final question, will you use one or multiple language theories? Will you use one or multiple? In other words, which ones are you going to use and why? As I said before, reflecting on what you learn is a way to sustain learning. Otherwise, you're going to lose it. So blog or wiki about each of the 6 language theories by responding to the questions in the previous slide. Okay, these questions. And then share the link to your blog or wiki in the course feed of the course. And here is the link to the course. Are there any questions? It's you who make it. The energy in these live virtual classes is amazing, amazing. I love the energy. Something that you can't get in a face-to-face class. There's a lot more focus, I think, in these live online sessions. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week and see you next week. Bye for now. Bye-bye.